All right, we got things to talk about today. Banned and restricted announcement November 10th, 2025. We got some good news. We got a lot of bad news. So let's get the good news out of the way. We're getting 4 mythic wildcard, another 4 mythic wildcards, and another 4 rare wildcards. If you have these cards already crafted before the ban actually happens on standard, you'll get your wildcards back. And if you already had them, that's a bonus wildcards for you. So we got the good news out of the way. That's good. So as we scroll down, considering that this is a historic / timeless channel, we're only going to be focused on those 2 in the video. And as you can see, I scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. Timeless, no changes, that's good. Historic, what do we see? Force of Negation is pre-banned. Makes sense, they don't want free spells in the format. Frantic Search, pre-banned as well. This is actually insane, especially considering that Lotus Field is very powerful in the historic format at the moment. Draw 2, discard 2, untap 3 lands. It's insane. A Mystical Tutor. This is an interesting one that I'm going to be talking about in the timeless section, but I'm actually surprised that it's coming, but it is pre-banned. Makes sense because it's a 1-mana tutor spell. And then Entomb, this is another card that I'm going to be talking about in the timeless section. Entomb is also pre-banned, makes sense. Reanimator strategy is relatively popular and historic. Even if Reanimate isn't there, they do have things like Life and Death and even Necromancy. And the Dark Depths is also banned, pre-banned in historic, which also does make sense because you could, kill your opponent with the Dark Depths into Thespian Stage, things like that. And they also got things like Vampire Hex Mage, right? So these pre-bans all do make sense. But now, what else is changed with historic right now? Well, pretty much nothing. We all kind of expected the Eldrazi's to get hit in historic, but it didn't. That is insane to me. So let's actually read what they have to say about historic to justify why the Eldrazi's didn't get hit. Alright, here it is. Historic. With plethora of cards from Arena Anthologies, bonus sheets, and special guests releasing coming to MTG Arena this year, Historic's card pool has expanded rapidly. For now, we are aiming to avoid format destabilization with pre-bans while monitoring the metagame to ensure that no individual deck is out of the line. Eldrazi has been especially enjoying popularity and success in high-level best of 3 with the addition of Eldrazi Temple, and is one of the decks that we are keeping an eye on, alongside aggressive Loras decks, Energy and Auras, and fast combo decks like Val Combo, Lotus Field Combo, and Persist Combo. While the metagame at each level of the ladder is reasonably balanced, the power level delta between the most popular decks in the lower ladder and the top tier decks is higher than ever before. You should expect to see more changes to Historic as we re-examine the format philosophy and ban list in the coming months. Alright, so I have a lot to say about this. They do acknowledge the fact that there is a power disparity between the top tier decks and the lower tier decks, but only in the lower ladder. Now, I do wonder if that's only talking about the ladder versus the qualifier that happened recently. Because apparently, in the qualifier, a lot of the non-Eldrazi decks got through, especially the Lotus Field Combo and, fast aggro decks such as Energy and Auras. And I did actually fear that potentially they will only look at what got through from the qualifier and not really the ladder as a whole. Even just a few days ago, I tested some decks, and about 50% of the ladders that I faced in 10 matches were Eldrazi's. So if they're only looking at the qualifier data, then we have some problems, right? Eldrazi's is undoubtedly very, very popular and powerful with high win percentage, even in the Mythic ladder. As you can see, the decks that they talk about are aggressive Loras decks, such as Energy and Auras, fast combo decks, such as Val Combo, Lotus Field Combo, and Persist Combo. So what do these all have in common? Well, the fact that they are very, very fast. It's either you win fast with hyper aggro decks, or win fast with combo decks. So that's where we're at with the Eldrazi Temple. Notice that we don't see any Jund mid-range, no mention of a Jund mid-range, which is relatively newer deck that came into the scene with the addition of the Barrogoyfs and the Pyrogoyfs. They're fun, but pretty hard to beat some of these combo decks. And even against Eldrazi's, they have a lot of land destructions and they can even go taller. So I have a feeling that they actually pulled this data out of the qualifier rather than the ladder as a whole. But they do acknowledge that in the lower ladder, quote unquote, there's a lot of power disparity, but it's also kind of true in the top of the ladder. You will only see these kind of decks because which are hyper aggro deck or fast combo decks to beat the Eldrazi's. So I am very sad about this. I was thinking about it, maybe like, hey, potentially, what if they don't ban anything in Historic? It's just crazy to me. It's a bit unfortunate with the Historic. I was going to play some Historic this week, but I might actually just take the week off and then just start fresh with the Avatar set. I'm not really sure. But they did mention that, you should expect some more changes to Historic as we re-examine the format philosophy and banned list in the coming months. So I guess this is like a small glimmer of hope for the future of Historic. If they really want the Eldrazi to stick in the format, which will also warp the format in a sense that there is going to be a lot of hyper aggro and a lot of combo decks, you should also give some tools to control decks or potentially more, even mid-range to have more tools to work with to verse them, So that's kind of my thought about Historic. Very unfortunate that nothing got hit. And I don't expect the Historic to change anytime soon. If you're kind of tired of the Historic, maybe it's time for you guys to try out some Timeless, potentially. Timeless has been evolving very, very rapidly. So let's talk about Timeless. So the Timeless section is very short and sweet. It says that Timeless has adapted to the addition of the Strip Mine and the Ancient Tomb, with the strategies revolving around Hydroponics Architect and Wary Zone Guard, rising up to coexist with the format mainstays such as Show and Tell and Mardu Energy. With the known polarity of Strip Mine focus and gameplay, we are prepared to make any changes if necessary, but thus far, the format seems to have absorbed these powerful lands quite well. We'll continue to monitor the Timeless through upcoming events to ensure the format remains fun and diverse for enjoyers of the high-power Magic. So, couple things to mention. It's short and sweet, acknowledging the fact that it is a pretty stable format. We have a strong mid-range deck, we have some aggro decks, we have some combo decks. Although we don't have a control deck, but we do have a tempo deck with the Hydroponics Architect, if you want to call that a control deck. But I did play some control decks in the form of like a Stoneforge Mystic or some Flood Moons, even without the Hydroponics Architect, and they do work to some extent. So I think the Timeless format is in a pretty good spot. But we have some things coming to Timeless with the Avatar set, and the card that a lot of people are the most excited about seems to be Force of Negation, which is great. It's our first free counter spell other than the Flare of Denial. I suspect the deck is probably going to play some Flare of Denials and Force of Negations together. I don't think you're only going to be playing Force of Negation, and I think that's what the tempo decks are going to do. As for Control might want to play some mana drains alongside of Force of Negation, potentially. So I do have some testings to do when the Avatar set does drop, so expect more decks of that sort from me. But as you can see, we have no changes. But if you scroll up, Historic has some pre-bans, which is very interesting because we expected some of these cards to not come to Magic Arena because some of these cards are actually commander cards. So Mystical Tutor is a commander card, and I believe Entomb is also a commander card. So the fact that these cards are also coming into Timeless format, notice how the border is different. The Mystical Tutor, Entomb versus Frantic Search, but they all have the same icons. The Frantic Search is from the Jumpstart, I believe. So I guess the Jumpstart is also coming to potentially Magic Arena. And I believe the Frantic Search is also draftable. All the Jumpstart cards are draftable too. But the Mystical Tutor is a commander card that I'm actually kind of surprised to see that the card is coming with the Entomb. So what is going to happen to Timeless is going to be pretty interesting because as you can see, for the Legacy, we have a Entomb and Nadu band. So this is kind of telling of how powerful the Entomb card is, and potentially format warping as well. So black deck getting stronger, we kind of hate to see that because black is already really powerful at the moment. But I don't think the mid-range deck that you see right now is going to be playing Entomb. I think the Entomb will probably only fit into certain kind of decks, because technically it is a card disadvantage unless you put something like an Aatroxa deck. So I don't think something like a Golgari mid-range, for instance, is going to be playing Entomb along with Aatroxa, considering that they don't really have a self-discard. So if you do draw it in your hand, it is going to be completely dead in your hand, things like that. So I don't think it's going to be the same deck. Potentially we'll see like Golgari mid-range, part of the meta, and something like a blue-black deck is going to be incorporating Entomb. The Entomb edition is interesting because although it is really powerful and warranted a ban in Legacy, we don't have like too many, free counter spells that made the Legacy version very potent. So you kind of cheat out one creature and then you kind of protect it with Daze, Force of Will, even Force of Negation potentially. So we're not at that stage yet, so I'm not really sure how powerful a pure Reanimator is going to be, especially considering that our format is heavily incentivized to already run a lot of white removal spells, such as Swords of Plowshare, Static Prison, considering that energy is very popular. A lot of Solitudes as well. So we'll see about how the Entomb will affect the format. Potentially, it might push to our first restriction in the format. One interesting thing about the Entomb in Thomas format now is that Frantic Search is going to be also part of the format as well. So we're going to have a Frantic Search in potentially like an Ancient Tomb style deck, being able to untap Ancient Tomb, things like that. But I'm not really sure. Reanimating a creature is pretty costly, and untapping Ancient Tomb with the Frantic Search might also be a little bit too much for the deck. So we'll see how the format turns out. I think the Frantic Search and Entomb edition is going to be very, very interesting for the Reanimator. The card that I'm actually kind of worried about is actually Mystical Tutor. So we kind of know that Show and Tell is a very powerful deck. Some say it's like the best deck. I feel like the best deck right now, in my opinion, is Golgari midrange. I think the Golgari midrange is ever so slightly potentially better than the Show and Tell, in my opinion. But it could change with the Mystical Tutor. It is a card disadvantage though. So for example, if you Mystical Tutor, grab a Show and Tell, put it at the top of the deck. When you do that, you are going down a card for a potential win the following turn. But in a Strip Mine format, you're kind of vulnerable to potentially getting mana screwed with your own card and even going down on a card. So although the Mystical Tutor is very, very powerful, but I can kind of see this happening a lot. So when I initially saw the Mystical Tutor, although it's really good for Show and Tell, and I thought this card would be very bad for the format, but the more I look at it, it doesn't seem that crazy for the Show and Tell. Like, sure, you can search for Show and Tell, but like I said, you're kind of vulnerable to getting mana screwed in a Strip Mine format. The fact that it puts it on top may be more devastating than we give credit for. I'm kind of reserved on the impact of the Mystical Tutor. The Show and Tell might just stay the same, because even during combo, the Tutor doesn't do much without other cards. Like, if the Omniscience is already down on the battlefield, maybe you can go something like a Mystical Tutor into Waterlogged Teaching, and then you play another draw spell, right? Potentially, right? It is good with other cards, but what if you just have a bunch of Mystical Tutors stuck in your hand? So we'll see the impact of the Mystical Tutor in the upcoming future. So yeah, I think Timeless is definitely evolving. The next set is going to be very interesting. Historic, not so much. Like, what are they doing? I'm actually so disappointed with Historic that I did say I was going to play some Historic this week, but because there's no changes, I feel kind of reluctant to even dabble in historic right now. So yeah, that is gonna be it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye bye.